Thank you very much for tuning in to another episode. This is not a podcast, but we still want to talk about some more cases that don't end up being talked about on the podcast. And today we have an interesting case that I ran into while I was researching for, I believe, podcast episode number 37, when we were talking about the disappearance of Stefanie Damron. There was another case mentioned, a case of a 33-year-old Indonesian woman, Attiin Shaw, who has been missing since September 8th of 2021. And why this case appeared on my radar was that Attiin was last seen 10 miles away from where Stefanie Damron was last seen. Now, when I was researching Stefanie's case, I think some of the media articles were insinuating that there could be a connection between Attiin's case and Stefanie's case. When I first looked at it really quickly as I was preparing my notes for Stefanie Damron's podcast episode, that was episode number 37. I just glanced really quickly at the case, and it looked like, the community suspects her husband to have, been responsible with her disappearance, but I marked Attiin's case as something that I want to look into. We didn't necessarily plan to do a podcast on Attiin's case, but I think the more you look at it, there's more clues and details here that I think worth mentioning here on the channel. And leave your thoughts if you enjoy, or if you don't mind listening to these extra smaller episodes about cases that are not planned for the weekly podcast, but I feel like they are still important. Every missing person is important, so we need to get to the bottom of it. Once again, Attiin's case, the general narrative, when I was first looking at the case really quickly, I believe it was like a couple of weeks ago, I was familiarized with Attiin's case. I think the idea was that the husband is responsible, okay? Attiin had been married for close to a decade, I believe, to this man named Mike Shaw. And the community heavily suspects him, so I guess the idea of this, discussion is to think whether there are other possibilities other than the husband's involvement. Because from what I understand, the husband is a free man. And from what I also understand, the husband is still living in the community with the children that he had with Attiin. And bizarrely, from what I also understand, he has provided some statements about Attiin's potential whereabouts that do not make much sense. And I think naturally he implicated himself by providing those bizarre statements we will be talking about in a little bit. Let's start at the beginning. Attiin Shaw. She was 33 when she went missing several years ago in 2021. She was from Indonesia, and she was last seen in Washburn, Maine. Washburn is that small town, but it's kind of close to New Sweden, where Stefanie Damron was last seen. By the way, Stefanie Damron's case, I looked at it shortly before recording. I do not see any more updates, so I guess nothing new developed in Stefanie's case over the last couple of weeks, but we will be keeping our eyes open, of course. She went missing. She was living with her husband, Mike Shaw, and their 4 sons. I believe there's a fairly significant age gap between Mike and Attin. Sorry, did I just say Stefanie was living? No, Attin Shaw. Attin Shaw was living with her husband, Mike Shaw, and their 4 sons. I believe there is a pretty big age gap between Mike and Attin. I can't exactly tell you the years, but I believe it was at least 20 something, because I think Attin was 33 and Mike Shaw was like in his 50s. So Mike Shaw, the husband that the community heavily suspects had something to do with Attin's disappearance, he says that he says that Attin left the house on September 8th, which was Wednesday, as he was out shopping for groceries or something. Mike also said that Attin had packed up her suitcase the night before. And he said that Attin told him that she intended to take a job outside of the United States. That's kind of strange. That's a strange way to go to bed. I'm not gonna lie. Mike reports Attin missing, not, on September 9, as you would, one day. It's probably a good idea to, after one day to report someone missing. Mike out here, he reports Attin missing in November. So around 2 months later. He was questioned by law enforcement, and he said that Attin left him to work on a cruise ship, and he could not remember the ship's name. Interesting. Mike, as far as I'm aware from my research, currently is not in contact with Attin's family. His last reply to Attin's father, I think it was more than a year ago, I believe. I could be wrong here. His last reply to Attin's father, who's, I believe, in Indonesia, he said Attin is with another man, most likely. So we have Mike providing really questionable information. Now, I will say we do not know the background, and we haven't been into that household, so maybe in some crazy way, like these ideas and these scenarios maybe make sense, but to me at first glance it looks kind of crazy. Attin met Mike in Indonesia back in 2011, so some time ago. That's like 15 years ago. Mike was a teacher in Indonesia. He had some sort of an English teaching job, I believe. And as he met Attin, they got married a few months later. They spent the next 8 years living together in Indonesia. Mike was a teacher there. Eventually his teaching contract expires. Then he relocates to Myanmar in 2019 with now, I believe, the big family. Because when he met Attin had one child already from another relationship. But I believe as they were in Indonesia, Attin and Mike had 3 other sons, because I believe they have 4 sons in total now. So the family of 6, I believe, moves to Myanmar in 2019. And then COVID happens. And due to COVID, in 2020, they relocate to Washburn, Maine, United States. Why exactly Washburn is a mystery, because Mike is originally from New Jersey. I believe he got a job as a teacher there, so he just went to Washburn. That's, I don't know, man. Like, Maine doesn't sound that bad, honestly. To me, Maine sounds kind of like a cool state to live in, so I really don't, I'm not gonna, question this decision too much. Now, naturally, Attiin struggled to find a job in the United States. I think there was some sort of visa problems that she was experiencing. Also, Maine is very different from Southeast Asia, where Attiin spent her whole life. So I believe the adjustment from, this very in-your-face, vibrant part of the world with different things and all kinds of stuff happening at the same time to a rural Maine community, it was definitely an adjustment. As I understand, she was having a hard time. So Attiin kept in contact with her family on a fairly regular basis. From what I can ascertain from the information online, her last communication with family, I think there were two times mentioned here. First is August of 2021. So let's remember, she goes missing in September, so this is roughly a month before she goes missing. She told her sister, I think the sister is still in Indonesia. She said that she had worked several jobs in Maine already. She worked at a pizza restaurant. She was cleaning empty houses, so it seems like she was able to find some sort of work. But she was looking for a new job. I think maybe she wanted something else other than these maybe boring jobs for her. I don't know. Maybe that was the vibe. In early September, she talked to her mother and a sibling. And the mother didn't report nothing out of the ordinary during this conversation. I don't know exactly when this conversation happened because she went missing on September 8th. So I reckon it happened definitely before September 8th. But I don't know if it happened like a day before her disappearance or what. But we do have something that she posted on September 7th, which was day before. I think this was on Facebook maybe, I don't know. So this was her last social media activity, one day before she went missing. She shared a link or some sort of a post, like she reposted something, but by the time friends and family tried to take a screenshot of it, because, after she went missing, people were kind of interested in her last social media activity. By that time, I think the link was broken or something like that, so they could not understand the content of what she had reposted one day before her disappearance. I believe this is a key detail in this case. Wouldn't you agree, guys? Like, if you repost something one day before you go missing, maybe that is like a secret message that we could think about. However, we don't know what it was, other than Attiin left a caption on this repost. So, she's reposting something and she's also leaving a comment about what she's reposting. As I understand, this was reposted in the Indonesian language, or like she made the caption in the Indonesian language, because there is no clear-cut translation other than that she said that whatever she was reposting made her head hurt. And it bothered her in some way. So I don't really know what to make of it. Is this important or not? I mean, you tell me. Let's talk about what else happened on the 7th of September. Because this is the day before she goes missing. So Mike claims, that Attiin had packed her suitcase the night before she disappeared. And yeah, as I've said, that was a strange way to go to bed. You pack your suitcase and you tell Mike, okay, I'm gonna look for a job outside of the US, and you just don't and that's it. And they had a fight about Attiin wanting to go back to work. So this is an interesting turning point in their relationship, I believe, because Mike was against, from my accounts, I could be wrong here, but Mike was against. This was something I found online. I can't even recall in which exact source. Mike was allegedly, let's just say allegedly, Mike was allegedly against Attin going back to work. Mike also claims that this fight about Attin going back to work was resolved by the time they went to bed. In fact, before they even went to bed, Mike said that they watched an Indian movie. It was some sort of Attin's favorite Indian movie, maybe like Bollywood. And Mike claims that Attin was feeling better as they went to bed together. So that's the information that we have. Let's remember the next day, apparently, Mike goes shopping and Attin takes her suitcase, leaves the house, leaves the 4 children behind, and never comes back. That's, the official story. Another thing to mention before we jump into the day of the disappearance, I'm not sure if, when exactly Mike claims that he had suspicions, but Mike had suspicions that Attin was in a secret relationship, and she was hiding her real identity to the other man, other than Mike, that she was, in this secret relationship, as she did not want this other man to find out that she was married. So Attin left the house the next morning as Mike was out shopping, either for groceries or for something else. It was never mentioned. It's important to mention that Attin, I don't know, I think she left with her suitcase. That's what I'm understanding. Or maybe she left without the suitcase. This also is something I don't know, but what I do know is that Attin does not have a driver's license and she has no means of transportation. So realistically, it's a very limited amount of ways that she could have left the residence. Her passport has expired ever since she has gone missing, and the passport has never been used. There's no other activity that would indicate that Attin was alive past the 7th of September or the 8th of September, depends on who you believe. Attin's family stated that she had a bipolar diagnosis. She was bipolar. She had bipolar episodes. Attin would feel bad about getting angry during one of her bipolar episodes, angry at her children, and she would feel guilty when she realized what was happening, and she would try to avoid those interactions with her children as she was bipolar. But when she would leave the home, and apparently this was something that Attin was doing, to what extent I can't say, but she would leave the house and she would remain active on social media, unlike the last time she left the house. And she had an agreement with her husband Mike that he would report her missing if she would be gone for more than a month. So if this is true, that means that Mike and Attin were living under an agreement on which Attin can disappear for up to 1 month. And Mike would just continue willy-nilly living his life. Is this a real agreement? I will leave that up to you to judge. Maybe it is. Attin, in her previous bipolar episodes, she never left the house for more than 1 month. That's why this one is a strange case, as she has been missing since 2021. Her cousin Zadia said that Attin would have mood shifts, angry outbursts, and it would not be unusual for her to leave during these outbursts. But she would remain on social media. I think the biggest strange factor in her case is the fact that she stopped social media activity, which is not how her family would expect her to conduct herself during her bipolar episodes. From one source, the disappearedblog.com, I found information that once Attin had posted pictures of herself relaxing in Bali during one of those episodes while they were still living in Indonesia. Hence, getting to Bali was not as big of a deal as they were still in Indonesia back then. So this is basically the lead up to Attin's strange, unexplainable disappearance. She packs her suitcase, tells her husband that she's gonna look for work outside of the US. I think they have a fight, as Mike is not okay with her going back to work. They resolve the argument according to Mike. They watch an Indian movie, and Attin goes to bed. The next day, Mike goes to the store, and Attin leaves. Leaves behind her life, her children, leaves everything. Sometime after the disappearance, Attin's family contacted Mike. I think this was the first time they contacted Mike, and Mike said that he hadn't seen her for about a month. So I think they contacted Mike in October. Then again in October they contacted Mike, and Mike said something very interesting. On the second time that Attin's family contacted Mike, Mike informed the family that he had reported Attin missing. But this was a lie. He lied because he reported Attin missing for real a few weeks later, in November. I will say, I found at least one source that said that he reported Attin missing on September 8th, on the same day as she was last seen. But the vast majority of sources that you will find online claim that he reported her in November. So I would like to know the real information here. Because if he lied to her family on their second inquiry in October and only reported her missing in November, he basically broke the already questionable and highly weird agreement to report Attin missing if she has been gone for longer than a month. So even under those rules, really strange rules that I have a suspicion might not be real rules that they, agreed upon. He didn't even follow those rules unless he actually reported her missing on the 8th, which, look it up, it seems like he reported her missing on November. So that's bad. That's pretty bad. Family started asking around. Attin's family, they were getting suspicious. They asked the Indonesian embassy, the consulate general in New York, a U.S. attorney. They contacted for, legal advice. They also did an interview to Indonesian media. They wrote several, Facebook posts in the local Maine communities of Aroostook County. And this is what he wrote, okay? I'm just going to read what he wrote. Dear good people of Washburn, Maine, a message of concern from Papua Indonesia. Attiin Shaw is still missing. She was last seen in your fine community and is the wife of Mike Shaw. She has family and friends here that love and miss her, and children in Washburn that need her. Please, any information, no matter how seemingly innocuous, share with us or preferably with the police in Washburn, who, my understanding, are still actively investigating her mysterious disappearance. Her passport has expired, and there is no record of her leaving the country, nor would she have the means to leave the country. No activity on her social media she utilized often, no activity on her credit cards, and no activity with her social security account, no record of her entry into Indonesia. She has just vanished, leaving young children who were the center of her life, and her parents and extended family distraught and desperate for answers. Anything you can do to find her would be deeply appreciated by many. Please ask friends and anyone in the area if they know something or have some details to share. Please do not forget her, as we have not. Many thanks for you, all in advance. So, this is the bizarre thing about the case, okay? The bizarre thing about the case is that as I understand, as Mike reported Attin missing, potentially in November, police did an investigation. There was some investigation, but they closed the case after, I believe, having an interview with the husband. And it took them more than 2 years, from what I understand. Or maybe less than 2 years. This is maybe a year and a half after. Washburn police were involved once more in Attin's case after they originally closed it down in 21. They got involved in March of 23 again for some reason after the community voiced its concerns. I think it was maybe Attin's family who created a buzz online, and the community somehow went to the police, and police decided to relocate more resources. Sergeant Chandler Cole, okay? Chandler Cole is an interesting guy. We'll talk about this guy in a little bit. He gave the case to a former police officer. Well, at that point she was still a police officer, but now she's not. Hunter Belenciu. Because the last 16 months of investigations were fruitless. So Belenciu, who is no longer a police officer, she wrote on Facebook and she posted a copy of March 2023 supplemental narrative. I think supplemental narrative is what you receive when you are assigned a case to investigate. And she said, I got to say, in my experience, it's atypical for an officer to independently release a report by posting photos of it on social media, but Attin's case keeps her up at night, and she wants to see justice done. So we have another interesting layer in Attin's case where it seems like police did a terrible job in the initial investigation, from what I understand. And the investigation had, I think, been tried to reignite in March of 2023. And this is where I would like to talk a little bit about Mike. Mike Patrick Shaw, the husband of Attin. He basically is a weird guy for doing some weird stuff. What he told Attin's family is that, they had a argument the night before, they resolved it, and then he told everyone this strange cruise ship story. And he can't remember the name of the cruise. So I'm thinking, is there a possibility that Attin was, in fact, experiencing a pretty severe case of bipolar? And she was talking like nonsense to Mike the night before, and she said some cruise ship that may even not be real, and this is why Mike is not recalling the name of the cruise ship. Is there a possibility that that's happening here? Because honestly, I could kind of understand this, but then I would hope that someone would clarify this a little bit more. And Mike, by the way, is a no-show. Mike is a complete no-show when it comes to Attin's case. He's not trying to defend himself, so obviously we are left with questions. And it's not looking good for Mike, because now he looks weird. Telling this cruise ship story. Some more information about Mike. So Mike, he's a teacher, as you all know. But this is where things get, once again, very interesting. Specifically, during the 3-month period between October 21 and December 21, he was working in a local trash facility, a landfill. He was working in a landfill for those 3 months, as Attin was missing. And we have information that the landfill, from what I understand, has never been searched. Another thing to mention is that Mike and Attin and the family, they were living right beside the Aroostook River, and the river was not searched for Attin's remains. Mike, according to the community, has not handed out any flyers. He has not posted on social media. He has not spoken publicly, joined the searches, and he has no contact with Attin's family in Indonesia. I tried to look for Mike online, Mike Patrick Shaw from Washburn, Maine, and he's a ghost. He's not online. We don't know anything about Mike, what he's doing right now. Other than, I believe he's still in the community. He's still in Washburn. He could be a completely innocent guy, just trying to stay under the radar. But the question is, if he is completely innocent, wouldn't it benefit him enough to go out publicly and talk a little bit. Or, I don't know, honestly. I'm kind of flipping between, is he responsible for Attin's disappearance or not? I mean, I'll let you be the judge. And remember, I just talked a little bit about Chandler Cole. Chandler Cole, the sergeant, as I understand, the former sergeant of Washburn PD. As I understand, Washburn PD is no longer an institution. It has been dissolved. I think the wider area sheriff's office had received the county, or like the city of Washburn, to police, to enforce the law. Chandler Cole was the guy who talked to Mike when Mike reported Attin missing. And Chandler Cole is the same person who was investigating the disappearance of Eric Foote. Eric Foote is a man who has gone missing in 24, 3 years after Attin went missing, and he was found dead. His remains were found dead. Eric Foote was 39. He went missing in January 30th of 24. He was experiencing a severe mental health crisis, and he was suffering from PTSD. He was an American Iraq veteran. He was walking along the road without winter clothing in January in Maine. He was crying and he was in despair. Passerbys made 911 calls. They reported him hysterical and underdressed. He didn't have any shoes on. He didn't have any boots, and he was displaying signs of mental health issues. Responding officer Chandler Cole, he told the family that, as he arrived to see Eric, he dropped him off at the hospital. But this was a lie. He dropped him off at a convenience store, many miles from his home, without transportation or proper clothing, and without any immediate medical attention, which, Eric needed. And what Cole did later would F up his whole career as a police guy. Because now, Cole was a bad cop. We know Cole was a bad cop. You know how we know Cole was a bad cop? Well, he later falsified his report to support his lies. His original report stated that he had taken Eric Foote to the Freshies convenience store in Presque Isle. Later, he changed the report to state that he had taken Eric Foote to the hospital. These changes were documented and tracked in an electronic police record system, and his police chief found it out. Police chief ordered external party to investigate, not to do their own investigation. And they charged him. He was relieved of his duties. Eric was found 84 days later along a river bank. His cause of death was undetermined. As I understand, it's to this day completely unclear what happened to Eric Foote. Completely unclear. We don't know what happened. He was having a mental health crisis. He was underdressed. Chandler Cole picked him up and dropped him off at the convenience store. For some reason, he lied that he dropped him off at the hospital later on. They found him dead nearly 3 months later. Chandler Cole relieved of his duties. Eric's death undetermined. Naturally, is Cole connected to Eric's death? I don't know. Maybe not. But he is connected to the case of Attiin Shaw in a way that he was the same guy who talked to Mike, Attin's husband, and he closed the case, as I understand, prematurely. So Attin was, she had all odds stacked against her. Mike is telling weird stories and is not coming out publicly to explain himself. He says Attin was cheating on him. He says that she went on a cruise ship. Can't remember the ship's name. You could kind of come online and kind of like explain yourself a little bit. Nah. He's, in his 50s, can't be bothered, chilling in Washburn. I don't know what he's doing, honestly. He could be innocent, but I think he should come out and say some words, about the case. And then we have Chandler Cole, who was the bad cop who was supposed to figure this out. And naturally, he didn't do it. I don't know. Maybe Chandler Cole isn't a bad cop, but he is a bad cop. He was lying, so he's a bad cop. He's a shady cop. He's a bad cop, he's crooked. Yeah, so Hunter Balenciu, the officer that was assigned Attin's case, she says that the initial report wasn't taken seriously enough. She also said that she thinks that Attin had better chances if the case received serious attention earlier. This is interesting, though. This is the one other thing that we have to mention. This is very important. This is insanely important, potentially. Community member had spoken to Balenciu as she was investigating Attin's disappearance. So a community member said to Officer Balenciu that she had visited the Shaw residence in December of 21, roughly 3 months into Attin's disappearance. She said that the house was messy. There was trash in the house. And there was a dark stain on the plywood floors. Dark stain on the plywood floors. So, I've seen other members on Facebook commenting, and I can't prove this, but there is speculation that Mike had done renovations after Attin went missing. And this is the annoying thing about this case. The Shaw residence was searched by police in February of last year, 2.5 years after Attin's disappearance. 2.5 years after. So they did go search. Why? Do they now suspect that Attin never left the home? It took them 2.5 years to start suspecting this? That this story that Mike said could potentially be fake? It took 2.5 years? Maybe it takes time, to get the search warrant. Mike had never spoken to Officer Hunter Belanciu, even though Hunter Belanciu wanted to schedule a call or a meeting. Apparently, he still lives in Washburn. And the only other thing that I will say that's kind of interesting and that I found online about this case is that there is a lot of members of the Maine community now, especially Aroostook community members, who are now taking upon themselves to advocate for missing people like Attiin, like Stefanie Damron, and like Thomas Hoyt, another person who had went missing from the area. There was a person, Kate Lay. Kate Lay is a good person on Facebook. Kate is organizing flyers to be stuck on like poles and stuff like that in the community. She put up flyers for Attiin Shaw, Stefanie Damron, and Thomas Hoyt this year on August 16. This year, okay? This year. She put them up on August 16. By September 7, like 3 weeks later, only Stefanie Damron's flyer remained. So now there's natural suspicion who is removing flyers in the community for Attiin Shaw and Thomas Hoyt. And I guess we don't know. Could this be a person who just, I don't know, took them down because they wanna maybe like bring them home or something for better reference? And this person doesn't have a phone, they can't take a picture. It's like an older person taking them down and for better reference bringing them home. Or what is the reason to remove the posters? What is the reason? So these are my finishing thoughts on Attiin Shaw's case from what I have so far. There was a strange fight the night before she went missing due to job search and due to Attiin saying she wants to go back into work. Mike has a problem with Attiin going back to work. Maybe he wants Attiin to take care of the kids. Attiin packs her suitcase. Is this a real thing that happened? I don't know. Mike allegedly reports Attiin missing in November. He provides cruise ship cheating stories. It seems odd to me, this whole detail. He conveniently works in a landfill for this period of time. The landfill is never searched. They also live next to a river. By that same December, someone goes over and there's a dark stain on the plywood, big enough for them to remember. I don't know what kind of stain this was. Their home is searched in 24 February. And we don't know anything else, like nothing else came out after the February 24 search. I don't know, just a strange, really strange case. I hope that we will get some answers because it seems like there's a lot of people that are missing Attiin. And for the sake of her family, I hope that we can find out something. Thank you for listening.